In Sydney Gardens, we're in the middle of a restoration project, and we're restoring the pleasure gardens from the 18th century. There's a lot of works going on to restore buildings and the parks, but we're also installing a new play area. And so behind me is a very large area that was the bowls club lawn and a small play area, and we also have some tennis courts. So that area is being reconfigured into quite an exciting new play area, which will have basketball, hoops, pana football, we'll have climbing frames and a natural play area, sand and water play. Lots of really interesting features. However, in the early stages of investigating the services that run through the area before we brought the big machinery on site, we discovered a layer of clinker. And clinker, which is the output of coal-fired power stations, was generally used as a drainage layer. So that was spread throughout this area, we believe probably under the tennis courts that were originally here to help drainage, and latterly then the bowls lawn. However, a few years ago it was classed as a contaminant, so we then have to stop work, re-evaluate how we approach all the groundworks and the ground moulding and moving. We've had quite a delay to the programme and extra costs, but it's being done in the right way. So we've taken specialist advice. We've put together what we call a materials management plan, which then identifies exactly how the contractor must move the soils, what to do with it. We've had initial sampling right across the area to look for contaminants, and then what we've done is separated out the soils. So the whole site was gridded 4 metre intervals, and each 4 metre grid was sampled. And then we separated out the clean from the soil that was contaminated.
Now, you decided in the end to bury it deeply on site, and am I right in thinking that Isambard Kingdom Brunel may have helped you reach that decision?
Well, we certainly have been very lucky in that as we dug down beyond the clinker layer, we have found lots and lots of river gravel and sand, mostly sand, and we've dug through that to be able to then bury the contaminant and then put the sand back on the top as a cap. We don't know the source of it because we're a little way from the river here, and some theories are that it was either used for under the canal, or so it would have been brought here, stored and used to go under the canal, and what was left was regraded, or it was something to do with Brunel's railway as it came through, and some of the cutting material was then placed and shaped.
Better to find sand than rock.
Absolutely. Had it been rock, we would have had to have gone back to the drawing board in terms of what we did with the contaminant. To take it off site is extremely expensive. We would have had to have cleared every bit of it right the way through and transport it some miles away, and then it's got to be treated as well. We can't just pile it up somewhere. So
dump it on somebody else's doorstep. To what extent is all of this going to put a big dent in the amount of money you've got to spend on the scheme? Because of this, will anything else suffer?
So when we bid for the money from the lottery, they ask us to set aside a sum of money for contingency. And the contingency is really for this sort of situation where we come across the unexpected. So we have drawn down from that pot in order to deal with the contamination, which means that the actual scheme costs haven't had to alter.
Let's look at some positives now. Where are we in terms of the transformation of this park?
Well, things are really moving apace now on the site. Any visitors to the park will have noticed, no doubt, earlier in the year, a lot of vegetation cutting, and that was really to clear areas so that we can start thinking about the planting, new planting beds, open up views, and generally get a sense of where things are that we need to be working on. The loggia, the Temple of Minerva and the Old Ruin, they're going to be worked on over the next few weeks. We're just doing some preliminary work, and then there'll be scaffolding and major works on that. In terms of the main build, we've already got the Petanque terrain, which is down by the main entrance and complete.
Yesterday, somebody described that as the biggest cat litter tray in Bath.
Well, I hope not, and it'll be a very brave cat to be crossing that road. It's a very busy road, but yes, so we've got that's finished, and people are free to give it a go and try it. We've finished the tennis courts up on the upper part of the gardens. Those have been painted, looking really nice, and they're open to play at the moment. Eventually they'll be gated and they'll be run then through leisure services like the other tennis courts, so you'll book online and be guaranteed a space. We've also got the site compound down here. Once that's clear, we'll have another 2 tennis courts in the lower gardens.
I'm hoping to speak to Andy of Iron Art in a while about progress on the 2 Edwardian loos. Have you come up with an idea for how to use them yet when they are back in place?
Yes, they're coming along really nicely. So they've been sandblasted and first coat of paint, and the ladies' Edwardian toilets are coming back into the gardens in a few weeks' time. The male Edwardian toilets are going to be, they're very difficult to get into, and the space is very narrow. We've got panels that are broken, so we're using that opportunity to put in toughened glass, which will be etched with the star pattern that you see on the metalwork, and then you'll be able to view into the toilets, and we're going to then have very large photographs and text interpreting the heritage of that bit of the gardens, as well as giving information about the rest of the gardens.
It's going to be somewhere serving all sorts of people at all sorts of ages. What do you say to people who maybe are a little critical of the transformation, who would rather see this former Vauxhall left just as a wooded glade?
Yes, well, it's interesting. I'm sure there are some people who, wished for it to go back to when it was overgrown and wild in places, but we've had very, very few complaints, and in fact very, very strong community support all around. We've had the residents' associations on our steering group since the beginning of the lottery project, and a lot of people feeding back how pleased they are and positive to see the change in the gardens. So.
And you have an awful lot of volunteers busy doing planting here today, and I think it's fair to say, Keith, in no way is this whole park going to be covered in tarmac. There's still going to be a lot of greenery here.
Yes, very much so, and the volunteers are going to be critical to keeping it very much in shape in future, because we're putting more trees in, more shrubs and more planting, and that obviously is something that the Parks Department are going to be having to look after in the future. The lottery will pay for 3 years of maintenance going forward, but having a really strong volunteer group taking that early establishment forward is brilliant.
They are all going to be future park keepers.
Very much so, yes, and it's at the basis of the community lottery project, where the big lottery funds community participation with the ambition that people feel more in connection with their parks and more connected to their spaces and involved. So this is the start of that process.
Very quickly, when's it all going to be finished?
Well, we're looking towards the end of the year for the main construction, the play area. Some of the planting may be early January next year. The whole project finishes this time next year. We've got a community pavilion which is at the back of the modern loos. That's going to be up and running probably from the late summer. And then I think the rest of it is pretty much phased over the next 6 to 9 months.